pieces to the differential. It came apart really easy. It was full of all the old oil. I cleaned all that out. I cleaned up the gears on a wire wheel, made sure everything fit together just fine again. I even took, this is the bearing that goes on the outside. I'm just going to go over bearings right now and checking them and making sure they're good. I am not a proponent of changing out all the bearings like I do with seals and gaskets. Most of these bearings are submerged in oil. They don't move at very high speed. They tend not to wear at all, but you can take and see if there's wear in them. If the inside moves in or out, which this one does not, it spins nice and easy. It doesn't make any horrible grinding sounds. It was pretty clean when I found it. I'm going to say this bearing's fine to use. I'm going to continue to use this bearing again. So now we get into the pieces of the differential, which if you've never been into a differential before, I find it to be an absolute just genius work of engineering. And kudos to the engineers and the machinists that make the parts that go in here. It's really a very mind-blowing piece of machinery and the things that it does and how it all works together. As I put it together, I will take and I will pre-lube it. I have some just 85-140 heavy gear oil here that I'm going to lube it up with. I'm not going to put a ton in, just enough so that it's not dry. Yeah, we'll fill this up before it even moves. It'll probably soak into things, but I don't like to put things like this together dry. I like to have some lubrication in them as I'm putting them together, so we'll do that. If you can see over here, I have the parts breakdown with me. As I said at the beginning of this, people are always amazed at how I can restore these tractors, and they think that I'm a genius. And I always point out to them, I said, without these books, I would be nowhere. It's hard enough with them sometimes. So I have the parts breakdown for the differential here that I'm going to follow in putting this back together. So hopefully I put it together correctly. One thing I want to point out, when I took this apart and I split the two halves, I put the ring gears that go inside them, I kept them with the half that they came out of. I don't know if it's pertinent that we do that. They both look like they're exactly the same to me, but I wanted to put them back in the same half I took them out of in case there was any type of strange wear that was going on, anything like that. And that's another thing that I did as I cleaned this up. I took and I looked at the gears real quick. I mean, these gears look like they're brand new. There's absolutely no wear on them whatsoever. They're in very good shape. I made sure that the oil holes are clean. There's 4 oil holes in them. They're little tiny, probably maybe an 1/8 inch, 3/16 of an inch hole for oil to pass through. You can see it goes through on the back side, so it lubricates the back side where it rubs. I even checked the orbit gears. They have a little bit of wear on them, but nothing that surprises me at all for the age of this tractor and what it's been through, but the wear that's on them is definitely negligible. And then the cross trunnion that they all ride on. I did clean this up with a wire wheel, so it was nice and clean. You can take some crocus cloth and maybe shine these up a little bit. They fit on real nice and easy, so I didn't want to remove any more material there, so I chose not to do that. They're clean, they're fine, they're ready to go. I cleaned up all of the locking tabs that go on to lock the nuts on the backside. You'll see that as we get into that. Cleaned up the bolts, the nuts for it. I even took and cleaned up the big, large ring gear, which I looked at that for any wear. This doesn't show any signs of wear on it whatsoever. It's really, really good to see that. It's amazing. So we know that this is fine. We can put this back together. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this piece right here first. And I'm going to take, and I'm just like I said, I'm going to put a little bit of 85-140 oil on my finger. Again, not a lot. I'm just putting a little something in here so it's not running on dry metal. I don't know if this is so crucial. I don't think you have to do it. I tend to be a little eccentric and get carried away with making sure that I do have lubrication in there. So when I do put it back together, it's not rubbing on dry steel. So we'll take and we'll drop, this drops right in there. And I'm just going to rotate it around, and you can see it just rotates right easy, nice in there, like that. Then I'm going to take the trunnion, and the trunnion has two sides to it here. I don't know if it matters which way it goes. I'm going to check my parts breakdown, and I don't see any reference to that as to it needing to go in any direction, seeing it just sits in there, that cross, and it holds the orbit gears on it. So what I'll do is I'm just going to, again, we'll just put a little bit of lubrication on our orbit gears on the inside here, because I just don't want to put them on there dry. There's no order that these go into. I do not believe that, and I say do not believe because I'm not 100% sure as I'm putting this together, but I do not believe that differentials are timed at all. In some transmissions, planetary type transmissions, when you get into those, the gears in there are timed. What happens if you put it together out of time? I would guess eventually it will bind. You'd probably know it as you put it together and go to test it pretty quickly. But I don't think there is any timing in a differential, at least not that I'm aware of. If there is, email me, let me know. I'd love to know. I'm not aware of it. I checked before I put it together. If you come up with anything different, let me know. And we'll probably find out here shortly as we put this together if it did make a difference. So I'm just going to take and put a little bit of lubrication where the cross sits in here. Again, not a lot, just enough to make it not sit on dry steel. And this guy, whoop, I dropped one already. Takes and sits in here, nice and easy. Now that I got everything lubricated, everything wants to go flying all over the place. What was interesting is when I took this apart, there are paint marks in here. And I don't know if they mean anything or not. I'm going to assume they don't. And hopefully there's no one in their house right now screaming, "You idiot, that does make a difference." But I've got everything in here right now. It's able to rotate around without any problem. Wipe my hands off a little bit here. And I'm just going to put just a little bit of gear oil on these gears. Again, I don't like them rubbing on dry steel if I can all avoid it. And I'll take and just spin this around if I can spin it now. And we'll just take and disperse some of that gear oil that I dumped in there. Now this gear sits in this half of the differential, so I'm going to take and again just put a little bit on my finger and just wipe it around on the bottom in there. And dump a little bit in there. And I'm just going to take and set that in there. And this is machined fit, so it fits in there, it fits snug. And if it doesn't, if it's jams in any way, something's not right. That's why I kept the gears with the halves that they came out of, because I wanted to make sure that they fit back in the way they should. All right, so I have that gear back in there. I'm just going to take and put some oil where the cross sits here. All right. And this all sits submerged in oil, so we don't need to make it stay clean in any shape, way, or form here. So, very gently, because this is the tricky part now, and I got to look at my bolts will come up through this piece. So what we're going to do is very carefully, we're going to put this over the top on that, and I don't think it matters which way this goes. I'm going to say it doesn't, except I got to line up where the crosses go. There we go. So I got the two halves together, and my bolts come through. Let me move this out of our way. The bolts come through up through the bottom side to where the flat part is here. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm forgetting Yep, these will come through here. Our ring gear sits on here. That's what I was forgetting. So I'm just going to turn this on its side so I can get all these bolts in. Hopefully it won't come apart on me. We're going to get a couple of them in just to lock the halves together. And I'm going to lay it back down. I'm going to put my ring gear over it. And I'm just going to look again, make sure I got this going on correctly, because like I said, I'm not 100% sure I'm right on this. It might need to go the other direction. We're going to try it this way. Let's see how it works. I want to say it goes on the other side, so I'm off 180 degrees. So let's pull this up. These need to go from the other side. See what I said? I have the parts breakdown here, and I still screw it up. But that's why we have the parts breakdown. Like I always say, take your time when you're putting it together. There's no reason to rush. And just because this gear sits on here, I'm just going to take and wipe in here a little bit of oil, just so it slides on here. And you'll see that it sits, it's machined to sit right on there. So there we go. That's correct. And I'm certain of it. Just going to lay this on its side. Hopefully it won't come apart. Yeah, all the bolts want to fall out. Bolt to come through, and now I just got to make sure that I have the bolts going through the right way. I do. I have the ring gear facing the right direction. It looks like it faces in, and the locking tabs go like such, and I'll take and put a nut on it to hold this one in place. Put another bolt through. Now these nuts do have a surface on them that goes down. You can see there's a slightly raised area. Just make sure you have that correct. These locking tabs are an absolute must. You do not want this to come apart, apparently, while you're got the tractor running. That would be very bad. You'll see a lot of locking tabs, or you'll even see the bolt heads may be drilled and there will be safety wire through the top of the bolt heads. John Deere is very well known for that. They don't use locking tabs as much as they use the lock wire that goes through the top of the bolt, which is kind of fun because you kind of have to sew. I call it sewing those transmissions together because it kind of feels like what you're doing. So here we go, we're getting it put together. Make sure my bolt head clears. Put my locking tab on. I try to put these locking tabs on so that when I bend the tabs up, I'm bending them in the same direction that they once were bent. That's the only downside of using locking tabs, is that metal does fatigue. I think mine is fine. You do have to be careful when you start to bend them over. You do not want one of these tabs to break off and get into the transmission and grind the transmission to pieces. So there we go. We have 6 of the 8 in. I got the last 2 I'm going to put in. Make sure that my head sits correctly on my bolt. And the last one going in. And make sure I have it the right direction. All right. We're all together. What I need to do now is I need to look up the torque specification on these. We will torque this down. Once it's torqued down, it'll be good to go. We can take and get ready to put back in the tractor. I've taken and set my torque wrench to 55 foot-pounds. I looked it up, and I believe the correct setting is 54. I'm just going to set this at 55. It's not going to make that much of a difference. I'm just going to go around in a star pattern and tighten these up. So I ended up taking this over to my workbench. I put it into my vise. That was the third hand that I talked about that I needed. It was a lot easier. I just set it in like this, clamped down on the bottom bearing surface, and I was able to go in a star pattern, tightened all of these nuts down to 55 foot-pounds. The last thing I need to do is just take and bend my tabs over, and I just got a chisel here just to help bend those up a little bit. I got a hammer. We're just going to take and tap those up and lock those nuts from being able to turn again. Be real careful doing this. Like I said, you don't want to break off the tab. I just bring up each edge with the chisel for now. I'll come back with the hammer and I'll flatten it out onto the flat side of the nuts. Help this one a little bit more. We'll just flatten those right out to hit that flat side of the nut. Give this one a little more help. There. I've got them all hammered down onto the flats. These nuts are not going to come loose now. There's no way that they can turn off of this. It'll hold it nice and steady. This is ready to go back into the tractor. Thank you for being here with us today on All American Tractor Works. If you liked what you saw today, remember to hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.